How on earth can there be two Famicom RPGs in the space of 2 weeks all about Taoism? Now, in fairness to Shinsenden, it's not intended as a religious recruitment tool. It's just part of the backstory. But it still feels weird to have this here. We've seen quite a few RPGs in the Dragon Quest mold so far. Shinsenden is definitely one of those. However, up to this point, there's really been only one serious challenger in terms of quality to Dragon Quest. That would be Final Fantasy II. Everyone else had always been playing catch-up, doing things like making copies of Dragon Quest II when Dragon Quest III was out. In terms of production quality, Shinsenden is the best Famicom RPG of 1989. It does more to present a detailed, realized world than nearly anybody we've seen so far. Just look as I walk around the temple where I received martial arts training. This is the starting location for the game, and while the layout is crude and the graphics don't have a lot of detail to them, it's still a set of pretty recognizable locations. You can generally tell who people are. If it wasn't for the graphics, this would feel like a mid-tier 16-bit RPG from a couple years later. Now that gushing praise out of the way, there is a major problem with Shinsenden. The encounter rate is just about the worst I've ever seen. It's one of those games where you can expect to take one step and then get attacked again. And here it's likely to happen 5 or 6 times in a row on you. So even though the initial grind isn't that bad, mainly due to being constantly attacked, it wears you down to be constantly fighting like this. I don't mean it wears your character down, I mean it wears you down. The story is about a being from another world who wants the 4 heavenly swords that were used in the creation of the world. Shinsenden is based on Chinese myth and legend, right down to the monsters that you get attacked by. In fact, there's a huge variety of monsters, and they're not heavily reused. Or at least, when they are reused, they're mixed and matched a little bit. So you're not just fighting the same set of 5 monsters over and over again forever. Later on in the game, there's even some enemies taken from R-Type. And since R-Type never made it to the Famicom, that would be their only appearance on the system. When you start out, combat works just like Dragon Quest. You'll be exploring and you'll get attacked, and then you can fight, use magic, use an item, defend, or run. But then we start scraping the surface a bit here. Your first companion is a magician, and she gets a ton of magic points. There's a little bit of randomness there, but around level 5, she has 100 magic points. Admittedly, spells tend to be expensive, but you can still use magic pretty much continuously until you're starting to make your run up to the boss. The hero gets spells, but far fewer magic points. In fact, I had the beginner's spell for 3 levels before I had enough magic points to cast it. The real power of the hero is that he gets a special technique. This changes as you progress through the story, but generally it's a super attack that uses up technique points instead of magic points. Another feature of the combat system is that when you get low on health, your defense increases dramatically. It's not something that the game really tells you about, it's just a very modern touch where it makes the combat more dramatic. And about 5 hours into the game, you get a special item for combat use. It lets you capture weakened monsters and turn them into pets that you use to fight other monsters. So there's actually quite a bit going on with the combat in Shinsenden. Just remember that if the hero's health falls to 0, it's game over immediately. Shinsenden features 3 battery save slots, and to save, you do have to talk to one of the masters at a temple. It's not just a matter of going to an inn and sleeping. Though a tip for starting out there's a free bed in the starting temple. I'd recommend taking advantage of that until you've got a few levels under your belt. While you're walking around, you can hit the A button to bring up a menu, and it's a pretty standard RPG menu. It's got all the standard commands like talk and look. One thing about your equipment is that when you get some new equipment, you'll want to sell the old stuff, and you have to do that at a separate shop. I can't say I got very far in Shinsenden. It's just the nature of Famidaily that I only have about an hour to play. And here, that was just enough time to build up and start heading into the first dungeon. I definitely wouldn't have made it through, though. I got poisoned almost immediately, so I might not have even made it back to town. Later on in the game, you'll find spots that look like dungeons, but just warp you around the world. In Japan, it feels like Famicom fans debate whether or not Shinsenden is a good game. There's a lot of respect for the innovation and quality of presentation, but it's also a bit of an overwhelming game. As for myself, Shinsenden wasn't on my radar before, but now it's a game I want to get into more deeply. It feels like there's really something special here, and I want to return to it at some point and see if I was right.